There's an interesting pattern developing about the reimposition of censorship in our society. The National Library of Scotland invited the public to nominate Scottish books for its centenary exhibition, Dear Library. And of 523 nominations, the top 200 were to be displayed. The Women Who Wouldn't Wished, a gender-critical anthology with essays by J.K. Rowling and Joanna Cherry, qualified but was excluded after internal concerns about staff well-being and the polarised context around gender self-ID. After a Freedom of Information request exposed the decision path, the row went public, and last week the library reversed course, apologised to the editors and put the book back on the shelves of the exhibition. That sequence matters because it shows how easily curation can become viewpoint discrimination and how quickly institutions can right the ship if they choose transparency and pluralism. So I think there are 5 claims here. The first is that process must be content neutral. If you invite the public to select a top 200, you bind yourself to a neutral rule. You can add content, counter speech, trigger notices, and staff support. What you cannot do is make a single exception because the speech is unpopular. The facts here are clear. The title made the cut, yet was removed as a one-off. That is not curation, that is content-based exception, that is censorship. And the U-turn is welcome, but the damage to trust is significant. And institutions need decision rules that are viewpoint blind and that are published up front, so the curator's duty to include is constrained by principle, not by pressure. Second issue is about safety and dignity that matter, but suppression usually backfires. The library's duty of care to staff and readers is real, yet exclusion often produces the Streisand effect. Attention multiplies, sales rise, positions harden. The better path is counter speech. Put the contested work alongside a dissenting shelf label and a reading list that robustly disagrees with it. That both recognises hurt and preserves freedom to read. The library's ultimate apology and the reinstatement shows the institution understood this, albeit late in the day. The third claim, the UK's wider speech regime is drifting towards prior restraint by other means. Moving away from books to bytes, the Online Safety Act now sits behind much of our digital life. Ofcom is phasing in duties for platforms and age assurance systems that have already produced widespread age gating and identity checks on mainstream services. Wikipedia challenged aspects of the regime and lost in the High Court this summer. The court didn't compel indiscriminate age checks on Wikipedia, but the judgment leaves Ofcom broad discretion about which services fall into the strictest Category 1 tier. Whatever your view of the Act, the direction of travel is clear. More gatekeeping, more liability risk, more incentive to over-remove. That chills lawful speech as surely as any policeman at the lectern. And I'm very mindful of what has happened to really quite significant books with the same sort of censorship-curation at play in Russia. Consider how this interacts with policing. In early September, the Met Commissioner publicly asked ministers to clarify the law after the arrest of the writer Graham Linehan, saying officers should not be policing culture war debates and that they are currently engaged in an impossible position. The point is institutional, not partisan. Vague categories and elastic definitions of harm push frontline actors towards erratic enforcement, which corrodes legitimacy. The fourth claim about prescription and protest, which need clear demarcation, clear bright lines. In July, the government prescribed Palestine Action. Whatever one thinks of the group's tactics, prescription turns support for a named organisation into a terrorism offence. And the result has been mass arrests, including older protesters holding simple placards made of cardboard. UN human rights officials have criticised the ban as disproportionate. Again, the question is not whether vandalism should go unpunished. It should not. The question is whether criminal damage is best addressed by existing laws or by a speech-restricting terrorism designation that criminalises expression of support as such. The latter is a very sharp instrument, and it is already cutting widely. The fifth claim International security is rising, and not only from the usual suspects. The US State Department's 2024 Human Rights Report flagged a deterioration in UK free expression protection, citing online speech prosecutions and buffer zone cases. You can disagree with some of its gloss, so do I, but the fact that Britain is now being placed in this frame should give us cause. The Country That Birthed, this amazing paper by John Milton, Areopagitisa, should not be creeping towards permissioned speech. And we should anticipate at least 3 objections. Objection 1 about harm. Surely the state has a duty to reduce harm to children, to targeted minorities. Yes, but harm reduction is not identical to speech suppression. And where there is incitement to violence, prosecute it. Where there is harassment, restrain it. Where there is crime, use criminal law tailored to acts, not allegiance or opinion. The more we conflate offensive opinion with violence, the more we train bad actors to weaponize violence. Objection 2 is identity-based age checks are not free. They impose privacy risks, create chilling effects, and push teenagers towards offshore, less safe corners of the internet. Even the Wikipedia litigation shows how hard it is to fit open civic knowledge projects inside a compliance grid built for commercial platforms. Proportionality should be the lodestar. At a time when we should be seriously thinking about the ethics of AI, we are instead thinking about restraining ordinary people. This is nonsensical. We are ignoring the real threat in our society. Ordinary people should embrace better education. And possibly, when we're looking at the ethics of AI, we should be thinking about the education of AI. Objection 3 is about the isolated missteps. Look at the pattern. The public vote overturned by the exception of curation. A policing chief asked for legislative clarity. Hundreds arrested for signs supporting a prescribed campaign. Courts upholding a wide regulatory perimeter online. This is not North Korea. It is something more subtle and therefore in some ways more insidious. It's a ratchet. The North Korea reference, by the way, is to Nigel Farage. Each cog is defensible in isolation. Together they narrow the space in which subjects of His Majesty can confidently speak, read, assemble and protest. What should institutions do? Again, I've got 5 points. The first is we should publish neutral rules and stick to them. If you crowdsource an exhibition, honour the results. If you must exclude, articulate a general principle that would exclude any title meeting that same criteria, then apply it across the board and invite public comment. After the NLS reversal, the template now exists. Apology, inclusion and contextualization. Use it. 2. We should prefer counter-speech to removal. In museums, libraries, universities, built structural dissent into displays. Pair contested works with informed criticism and hosting guidelines. Give staff support without throttling leadership. Leave the statues in place. Just contextualize them. 3. Demand legal precision. Parliament should narrow broad speech offences and review prescription thresholds to ensure we punish acts, not opinions. The Met Commissioner has asked for clarity. Provide it. 4. Insist on proportionate online enforcement. Ofcom's task is formidable. It should calibrate duties to service, risk and protect privacy by default. Courts have signalled that the Act doesn't mandate indiscriminate identity checks. Regulators should operate with that restraint in mind. 5. Protect the right to read. Libraries are not therapy rooms. They're engines of pluralism. If a book wounds, counter it in the open and let citizens, let subjects decide. Let them judge. Shielding adults from seeing a spine in a glass case is not safeguarding, it's paternalism in a hurry. So, to close where I began, the NLS case is a microcosm. Good people tried to manage a fraught climate. In doing so, they made a content-based exception that crossed a line. Then, under scrutiny and dialogue, they tried to correct that course. That arc is encouraging. It suggests we can build institutions that are confident enough to host disagreement and careful enough to support those who are hurt by it. We can hold two ideas at once. One, words can wound. Two, suppressing books or policing opinions will not heal those wounds and will slowly unmake a free society. The remedy is not silence. The remedy is speech, context, debate, and law that targets violence without criminalizing dissent. If Britain wants to lead again on liberty, it should start in its libraries, on its streets, and online by choosing argument over erasure, rules over exceptions, courage over comfort.